In the small, insular village of Ravensmoor, the people lived in perpetual fear of the Whispering God, an ancient entity said to dwell in the nearby forest. Stories passed down for centuries spoke of a time when the villagers had struck a dark bargain with the deity to ensure prosperity and safety. In return, the Whispering God demanded an offering every 7 years, a child, delivered to its sacred altar deep within the woods. For years, the villagers complied, each family praying their child wouldn't be chosen. But as time went on, the villagers grew more desperate and cunning. They began using outsiders, travelers who wandered into Ravensmoor unaware of its cursed legacy. Nathaniel Ashcroft was a scholarly man, a historian searching for evidence of ancient rituals. His wife, Evelyn, had recently suffered a stillbirth, leaving her emotionally fragile. When Nathaniel heard of Ravensmoor and its mysterious lore, he decided it was the perfect escape and an opportunity to dive into his research. Evelyn reluctantly agreed, hoping the isolation might help her heal. The couple arrived in the village on a foggy evening, greeted with forced smiles and wary glances from the townsfolk. The innkeeper, an elderly woman named Agnes, warned them to leave before nightfall. "There are things here you do not understand," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the dark forest. Nathaniel dismissed her words as superstitious nonsense. "The superstitions themselves are worth studying," he told Evelyn, who remained uneasy. That night, Evelyn awoke to faint whispers echoing through their room. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the voices grew more distinct, speaking in an ancient tongue she didn't recognize. Peering out the window, she saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the forest, its elongated limbs reaching unnaturally toward the sky. She shook Nathaniel awake, but when he looked, the figure was gone. "You're imagining things," he said, though he couldn't ignore the chill in the air. The next day, Nathaniel ventured into the forest with his journal, leaving Evelyn at the inn. He discovered strange carvings on the trees, symbols resembling eyes, spirals, and teeth. As he sketched them, he felt the sensation of being watched. A sudden rustling in the bushes made him turn, but nothing was there. That evening, the villagers held a festival in the town square, an event they claimed was to celebrate the harvest. Despite the lively music and dancing, an undercurrent of tension lingered. Evelyn noticed how the villagers frequently glanced her way, their eyes full of pity and fear. During the feast, an elderly man named Elias approached Evelyn and Nathaniel. His voice was low and trembling as he muttered, "Leave this place. They've chosen you." Before they could question him further, a group of villagers dragged Elias away, calling him mad. That night, Evelyn's dreams were filled with images of the shadowy figure she'd seen before. It beckoned to her, whispering promises of reuniting her with her lost child. She woke in tears, her grief mingling with a growing sense of dread. Nathaniel's research led him to a hidden chamber beneath the village church, where he uncovered ancient texts detailing the pact with the Whispering God. The entity fed on the despair of its offerings, and in return, it granted the village bountiful crops and protection from external threats. When Nathaniel confronted Agnes, she admitted the truth. "Your wife, she's been marked," Agnes said, her voice shaking. "The forest has chosen her to bear the next offering. If you try to fight it, the entire village will suffer." Nathaniel refused to accept this. He resolved to break the cycle and save Evelyn, no matter the cost. As the villagers prepared for the ritual, Nathaniel and Evelyn fled into the forest, hoping to find the altar and destroy it. The deeper they ventured, the more the forest seemed to come alive. The trees whispered in unison, their bark twisting to form grotesque faces. Shadows danced just beyond the edges of their lantern's light. Evelyn began hearing the Whispering God's voice again. It spoke of her child, claiming it could bring the baby back to life if she surrendered willingly. Desperate and conflicted, she started to falter. "Nathaniel, what if it's telling the truth?" she asked, her voice breaking. "It's lying," he insisted, gripping her hand tightly. "It preys on your pain. We have to keep going." They eventually found the altar, a stone slab surrounded by a circle of skeletal remains. Nathaniel began smashing the symbols carved into the stone, using the knowledge he'd gleaned from the texts to disrupt the ritual. But the forest fought back. the shadowy figure materialized before them, its form shifting between monstrous and human. It towered over them, its hollow eyes fixated on Evelyn. "You cannot defy me," it hissed, its voice a symphony of agony and despair. "She belongs to me." Nathaniel stood his ground, reciting an incantation he'd found in the texts. The whispering god howled in rage as the symbols on the altar began to glow, cracking the stone. The entity lashed out, sending Nathaniel flying into a tree. As he lay dazed, the whispering god turned its attention to Evelyn. It showed her visions of her child, alive and smiling. "Just one offering," it whispered, "and you can hold your baby again." Evelyn's heart ached with longing, but she saw through the illusion. Summoning her courage, she grabbed a shard of the broken altar and plunged it into the entity's chest. The whispering god let out a deafening scream, its form disintegrating into ash. The forest fell silent, and the oppressive darkness lifted. Nathaniel and Evelyn emerged from the forest at sunrise, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. The villagers, sensing the end of their cursed pact, approached them with a mixture of gratitude and shame. Evelyn turned to them, her voice steady. "Your fear allowed this to happen. Never again." The couple left Ravensmoor, vowing to rebuild their lives far from its shadow. Though the memories of their ordeal lingered, they found solace in the knowledge that they had ended the cycle of despair. And deep in the forest, where the altar once stood, wildflowers began to bloom.